Trump is also calling out Canada, and I would say more specifically our prime minister, which I squirm calling him such, but
Yeah.
nonetheless he is Prime Minister Mark Carney, who's been in the role what 10 days, not even 2 weeks yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Donald Trump took to Truth Social to post that if the European Union works with Canada in order to do economic harm to the USA, large scale tariffs, like the one that we will share with you here now, far larger than currently planned, will be placed on them both in order to protect the best friend that each of those two countries has ever had. And so this comes after Mark Carney, when he was sworn in as prime minister, decided to jet set over to the UK instead of actually calling or going to meet with President Donald Trump amid these trade tensions and this tariff war and this escalation, and very much a lack of negotiation that seems to be taking place on the federal level. So that was his priority, was to head on over and meet with Macron instead of going and meeting with Trump. And so now Trump has put this out on Truth Social. And at the same time that he has announced this 25% tariff on all cars, vehicles, cars not made in the US, which maybe we'll just play that clip and we'll come back and comment on it.
So we'll effectively be charging a 25% tariff. But if you build your car in the United States, there is no tariff. And what that means is a lot of foreign car companies, a lot of companies are going to be in great shape because they've already built their plant, but their plants are underutilized, so they'll be able to expand them inexpensively and quickly. If parts are made in America and a car isn't, those parts are not going to be taxed or tariffed. And we'll have very strong policing as far as that's concerned. For the most part, I think it's going to lead cars to be made in one location. Right now, a car would be made here, sent to Canada, sent to Mexico, sent all over the place. It's ridiculous. So this is a very simple system. And the beauty of the 25, it's one number. It's not up or down depending on the cost of the car. It's one number. And that number is going to be used to reduce debt greatly in the United States and to build things, reduce taxes. I mean, basically, I view it as reducing taxes and also reducing debt. And within a fairly short period of time, I think we're going to have a balance sheet that's going to be outstanding.
So, do these auto tariffs go into effect today or on April 2nd?
They go into effect on April 2nd. We're signing today. It goes into effect April 2nd. We start collecting on April 3rd.
Yeah, so there you have it. I just wanted to share this post from Ryan Garrettson, who notes that automobiles and parts compliant under the USMCA, so that's the current trade agreement between the US, M is Mexico, and CA is Canada. And so under that trade agreement, there will be certain stipulations that are tariff-free, and perhaps that will change with more signing of various orders, it says here, in consultation with U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the Secretary of Commerce. So there are some things that aren't entirely clear based on the hysterical headlines of the mainstream media. They just run with this trade war, 25% tariffs on vehicles. They don't do any sort of due diligence or dig a little bit deeper into what those trade agreements stipulate and specify. So we'll see what actually happens there. But it seems like, and I had another post here from Harrison Fields. He's the deputy press secretary for the White House. And so it says here that USMCA compliant automobile parts will remain tariff free until that consultation happens. And so I don't know if this is the big bad wolf deal that the mainstream media is making it out to be. But nonetheless, it has completely derailed Carney's campaign tour plans. He has detoured from his campaigning to apparently finally now, this was the nail in the coffin for Mark Carney, that he has now decided to finally deal with Trump's tariffs. I mean, specifically the auto tariffs. But he announced that he's heading back to Ottawa, and he will no longer be following the campaign trail to deal with the fallout of a new auto tariff announced by U.S. President Donald Trump. And, Sheila, I think that I have a sneaky suspicion that this is actually because Carney can't can't maintain any sort of decorum in front of the media
Yeah.
when he's out on
Yeah.
the campaign trail and he's questioned. You saw yesterday he had that little hissy fit.
Yeah, any reason to get off the campaign trail, honestly.
Yeah, and he's only been on it for 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're already seeing Carney's true colors shine through when he's off cuff,
day.
off the script with the media questions. He can't handle it. It seems to me that he can't handle it. And so this is, in my view, a really convenient excuse for Mark Carney to say, oh, I better go back to Ottawa to finally deal with my actual priority, some real priorities and responsibilities, rather than having done that when he first took office almost 10 days ago.
Yeah. If Mark Carney were remotely serious about this, again, his first trip would have been to Washington. And he wouldn't have been lying, flat out lying about his attempts to communicate with President Trump. If this were a real concern for the Liberals, they would not have prorogued Parliament so they could run a leadership race. Now we find ourselves in the middle of an election campaign and no government really who can deal with the tariff threat. And really, the blame lays on Jagmeet Singh. If he had let the government fall months ago, we would have a new government in place. We probably wouldn't have these extreme tariffs because we would have a government in place that wasn't responsible for the devolution of the relationship with the Americans. Instead, we don't really have a government in place. We have an unelected prime minister who has Trump derangement syndrome, who thought that his first order of business should be shoring up the anti-Trump cabal with the Europeans. And that is what Trump's Truth Social post is all about. He basically said, I see what you tried to do with the Europeans. And if any of you get any ideas, you guys are in for a world of hurt. They think they're smarter than Trump. Trump is cagier than the works. And instead of just shutting up and getting down to work, now we've got Carney convening his task force or whatever, and putting his campaign on park, which is, as you rightly point out, a convenient way to get his lack of patience with the media off the campaign trail.
Yeah, exactly. He takes to social media to post he made this announcement here. We have a clip. It's a bit long, but maybe we have time to share it in its entirety, where he was reacting to this new tariff, the new 25% tariff.
As if any of this is a shock, by the way. Trump's been threatening tariffs since he took office, and the Liberals thought they could rag the puck until it changed their poll prospects, and I guess it did. But the crushing effect this is going to have on the Canadian economy should not come as a surprise to anybody. It's not like Trump didn't exactly tell us what he was going to do for months now.
President Trump announced 25% tariffs against our auto industry. And this is a direct attack, to be clear, a direct attack on the very workers that I stood in front of, Unifor workers I stood in front of this morning at the Ambassador Bridge, a bridge that is a symbol and a reality up until now of the tight ties between our two countries, ties of kinship, ties of commerce, ties that are in the process of being broken. We will defend our workers. We will defend our companies. We will defend our country, and we will defend it together. You know, this will hurt us. But through this period, by being together, we will emerge stronger. I think what's happened, and this was part of our discussion, over the course of the last several months, Canadians as a whole across this country, have gotten over the shock of the betrayal.
Several months.
And are learning lessons.
Even he says several months this has been in the works. We have
to look out for each other and work together for each other. And I just want to say a few words before taking some questions about what my government has done to turn that sentiment into reality. We made a commitment a few weeks ago to use every dollar that we collect from retaliatory tariffs to support workers, to directly go to support workers. And last week, we made a series of changes to the EI system in order to take the first big step to make good on that promise. There'll be more. We've announced, of course, retaliatory tariffs. We have other options for those retaliatory tariffs. I have asked for a meeting, I will convene rather, a meeting of the Canada-US cabinet tomorrow to discuss our trade options. But we're also providing the option of major liquidity for our companies. We put in place an ability for companies to delay tax payments. We've put in place a large facility for our largest companies, some of them which may be affected by this, would be affected by this, to draw on liquidity in various forms so that they can take longer-term decisions without undue pressure from short-term unjustified actions. It's also why we focused, in part in anticipation of what might happen, on today's announcement that I made in front of that Ambassador Bridge.
It's too boring.
For the $2 billion
It's killing me.
strategic
Yeah,
response.
yeah, I could watch him at 2 times the speed because that is just so long and drawn out to really not say a whole lot. And the liquidity thing now, so now all of a sudden Carney cares about keeping business in Canada. Seems a bit hypocritical given that when he was chair of Brookfield, they left and went to the US. And, you know, in a roundabout way, he's basically saying, hopefully businesses don't do that now. So we're going to let them defer their taxes for a little bit. This obviously doesn't seem like any sort of tangible solution to a tariff threat and potential war.
Yeah, and let's not remember how his Canada-US trade panel is just a bunch of washed up left-wing cranks with Trump derangement syndrome. This was the best he could come up with. He couldn't put anybody on that panel that actually had a good relationship with Trump, because isn't that what you want when you're dealing with somebody in trade negotiations? No, he appoints Jean Charest, Stephen McNeil, Rachel Notley of all people. What does she know about business except to run it out of town? And Notley's former chief of staff, who was a union crazy person, Brian Topp, who's like an environmental radical, and also who's the bad dragon from Dragon's Den, the lady?
Arlene.
Arlene.
Yeah, Arlene something.
Yeah, they couldn't even appoint Mr. Wonderful, who's got like a weekend pass, it seems, every week down at Mar-a-Lago. No, they picked the bad. Yeah, Arlene Dickinson. They appoint Arlene onto this panel instead of old Mr. Wonderful. Like it's these are the people who he's reconvening his emergency war room to deal with Trump. Just a bunch of washed up left-wing losers. Like, it's just, God help us. It's a surprise things aren't worse.
Well, and if those are the remarks that we're getting from a prime minister who's supposed to be, you know, leading the country and offering reassurance through tumultuous, tough times, I don't think that is it at all. He finally acknowledges that the tariffs are going to hurt us, Canada, the economy. So I think that's kind of a breath of fresh air, but it's not very nothing in there reassured Canadians after he led with, these are going to hurt us, and I guess elbows up because we're going to talk more about it later. There was nothing reassuring in there.
And let's talk about what he means by retaliatory tariffs. So those are tariffs on things coming into the country, made in America, that will make things that are made in America cost more for Canadians. Then they're going to take the money that they are charging on those tariffs. So they're going to take the money from overcharging Canadians and then redistribute it to the hardest hit sectors in Ontario and Quebec in a vote buying scheme. So everything costs more for Canadians, and then they're going to take that money and give it to the auto sector in Quebec and Ontario. Great.
We have another clip. Yeah, we have another clip here. I don't know if I guess we'll see if we can get through it, but it's basically where Carney is, acknowledging that he does have to have a conversation with President Trump.
I want to
again.
Point this out
why?
Because this is a lie, by the way, and we'll get to that in a second because he was fact checked by the Americans on this. Don't count on the Canadian mainstream media to do it, the Americans were like, did that really happen? Let's dig. And this is the difference between liberal money and a free market in the media.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate that the President and I speak, given the action that he's taken. I'm sure that will happen soon. I'm not going to give you a precise timing on that. In terms of options, which was the second part of Ms. Martin's question, even during a caretaker period of government, we have anticipated this possibility. We have put in place the mechanisms so that if it is appropriate for retaliatory tariffs, and there's many considerations to be taken in those regards, and I want to have the meeting of our cabinet, Canada-U.S. cabinet, other considerations. We need to see the details of the executive order, but we will take the steps that are in the interests of Canadian workers, of Canada. We are going to stand up for Canada. We're going to be united, and we will fight in a unified way. And I would say, if I may, and I will, Lana and Ms. Payne can speak for herself, obviously, the discussions that we've had, the discussions I've had with Premier Ford, we're entirely aligned in terms of the seriousness with which we're taking this and the seriousness of our response. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So as Jason Leider points out on X, and Jason's with Enterprise Canada, follows this stuff very carefully. He said, Carney's lies are so weird. Earlier, he said he wanted to look tough by saying he wouldn't reach out until Trump showed respect. Remember that clip from the other day? So journalists actually called the White House. Turns out Carney had asked. It's like he's never had a job where people checked his work. Just stupid fibs for no reason. And then it says it's been reported for about 10 days the PMO had been trying to organize a call with Trump. The White House position on waiting is perfectly logical. But anyways, a couple of days ago, Carney looked straight into the cameras and said he wouldn't call and didn't want one until Trump showed respect, despite having his team badger the White House for a call. It's baffling. But this is what happens when you jet off to Europe instead of down to Washington to save the Canadian economy. This is, you gave Trump the cold shoulder, now you're getting it back.
And again, this all goes back to our porous borders, unabated immigration, allowing toxic, deadly drugs to proliferate on our streets. And so if we want to protect Canadians, if we want to protect Canada, if we want to protect workers, as Carney would have you believe in those clips there, perhaps cleaning up our streets, dealing with this unmitigated immigration that we have that is causing a collapse of our social systems and our frameworks, from our healthcare to our housing to our cost of living. This is how you would help Canadians and help Canadian workers. And yet that has fallen entirely to the wayside and has been on the trajectory to end us up in this mess for quite literally years. And now all of a sudden everybody's paying attention, but kind of like look over here, not over there, with these Trump tariffs that came to a head because of these otherwise unmitigated, unabated issues that are proliferating on Canadian streets.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.